Andreas' sister Nadia and her family for taking such good care of me and my wife on our Shabbat. We would have starved to death without kosher food. You know what kosher food is? It's half the price at double, it's half the taste at double the price. But your food was delicious, and thank you very much. And finally, I understand that Ricardo Salinas, who is here, is a major sponsor of the event. Thank you for bringing so many of us from the United States, south of the border, to discuss such important ideas. So thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if we are to discuss where it is that we are going, where we are headed, then we must begin by first identifying where it is that we are. Well, the first thing we know is that we have no money left. It was all consumed by greed. You know the famous story of a man driving his car down a New York highway when he gets into a terrible accident and the car smashes into a railing and it's now like an accordion. And the man jumps out of his car and he says, "My Mercedes, my Mercedes." So a police officer walks over to him and says, "Sir, I don't know how to tell you this, but your left arm is 100 feet down the highway." And the man looks at the empty socket and he says, "My Rolex, my Rolex." Well, there are no Mercedes left and there are no Rolexes left. Every day, I don't know how many it is, a few hundred people from Mexico try to find their way into the United States in search of a better life, and as they cross the borders and as they cross the barbed wire, just when they reach the promised land, they suddenly see all these Americans coming toward them, and they say, "Oh my gosh, it's the immigration, it's the customs officials." When really it's just a bunch of people from Texas trying to sneak into Mexico looking for work. That's all it is. Okay, we have no money, but that's okay, because we have love, right? And the Beatles said, "I don't care too much about money, because money can't buy me love." Do we really have love? I want to conduct a very quick experiment. This is a question that I am putting out to all the women, just the women. It's a precise question, so please listen carefully. If you're a woman in the audience, raise your hand if you need a man. Now, before you answer, I did not ask you to raise your hand if you can stomach a man. Less so did I ask you to raise your hand if you can survive a man. Just raise your hand if you need a man. Raise your hand. Okay, there's 2,000 women in this audience. I see 4 hands up, and they're all being raised like this. You would think I asked you to raise your hand if you have a sexually transmitted disease. Rabbi, I have this disease. It's called a man. I don't know how I got it, and I really don't know how to get rid of it. Now, to all the women again, raise your hand if you need a refrigerator. Raise your hand if you need a refrigerator. Okay, now why is it that you would acknowledge a dependency on a piece of metal that cools your milk, rather than a piece of warm flesh that fires your heart? The answer? Because GE brings good things to life, right? He brings his smelly underwear to life. But so much for love. We don't have much love either. By the way, I'm not trying to discriminate against men by not asking men, raise your hand if you need a woman. But whenever I've asked that, what the men hear is, raise your hand if you want sex right now. Okay, so we have no money. I say we have a delayed reaction with the translation. Okay. I think about a week after I leave, suddenly some guy in the back's going to break out laughing. See? Okay, no money, no love. At least we have sex, right? I mean, come on, this is the modern age. There may not be love, but at least there's sex. Does anyone know what the frequency of marital sex is in the United States between married couples? What is the frequency? Anyone? Once a month? Okay, that woman over there just won a free counseling session. Anyone else? What's the frequency? Help me here. Anyone else? Twice a week? You think us American men are like you Mexican men? Are you out of your mind? Not every American male is on a Viagra drip, okay? It's actually once a week. It's not bad, 50 times a year, right? But it lasts for 7.5 minutes at a time. This is true, and that includes the time he spends begging. Okay, and by the way, this is the reason, this is also true. Do you know that married women are 20% heavier, larger than single women? And this is one of the main reasons. Because the single woman comes home and she checks what's in the fridge and then she goes to bed. But the married woman comes home and she checks what's in the bed and then she goes to the fridge. Okay, so we have no money, we have no love, we have no sex. At least we have God, right? I mean, God wouldn't leave us, right? Well, not according to Michael Sherner, who I understand was eating rabbis, priests, and imams for breakfast the other day right here. According to him, religion has become an abomination. Religious people are fighting each other, they're defeating each other, and we've become a materialistic age, so God has abandoned us as well. Well, finally, at least we have our happiness. We have our happiness, right? Turns out we don't have that either. Do you know that 1 out of 3 American women, 1 out of 3, is on an antidepressant? Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil. Juan Ramon mentioned that one of the 4 great challenges in our world is to combat depression. You mean America became the most powerful, richest nation in the history of the world, and 1 out of 3 people need to take a pill to be happy? And if we were really so happy, would we really be watching 500 television channels per night? If we were so happy, here's a little experiment. Look to your left or to your right, to the person sitting right next to you, and tell me if they look happy, okay? Now, what many of you just did is look at your spouse, right? I mean, teenagers, kids used to be full of life. Do they look happy today? Did you ever try to speak to your teenage son or daughter? Jeremy, this is my friend Rose. She's come to have lunch with me. Oh? What? Did you ever try to have a conversation with your husband while he was watching soccer or football? At work, he is an intelligent biped who communicates using his higher cognitive thought. The moment he comes home, he's been reduced to a monosyllabic brute who can just thump his chest. So we have no money, and we have no love, and we have no sex, and we have no God, and we have no happiness. My friends, we're in trouble. We are naked and we know it. And I've got 11 minutes to solve all this. There was another couple who were naked. Long, long ago. You know the story. Their names were Adam and Eve. And they were placed into a garden where they had no clothing. They had nothing, no cars, no fancy watches. And yet, they were in paradise because they had each other. They didn't have clothing on their backs, but they had each other. But then came a serpent, a snake, and he told them the ultimate lie. And he said to them, how could you be happy? So they said, there's fruit, there's trees, there's natural beauty. And he said, but didn't God tell you there's one fruit from which you still can't eat? How could you be happy when you can't consume? How could you be happy when you can't devour? How could you be happy when Americans have more money than you? Or at least they used to. And then suddenly Adam and Eve, who had no clothing, looked at themselves and they said, oh my God, he's right. We're naked. We have nothing. And they got depressed. And they worked their guts out ever since to prove that they're not naked, to prove that they're important. They worked their guts out to prove that they matter, not from the inside, but from the outside. They proved not that they would be judged by the quality of their relationships, but by the quantity in their bank accounts. And ever since then, men and women have lived by two great lies. We had a lecture last night, brilliant lecture that said you have to lie. There has to be some deception. That's true, but only because we have to counter the original two great lies. Lie number one, that men are judged primarily by what they do and not who they are. What is the first question a woman asks a man when she meets some guy at a party and she's thinking of dating him? Does she say, tell me about your heart? Does she say, what are your hobbies? Of course not. Come on, help me here. She says, what do you do? And when he says, I pump gas for a living, she says, oh, I'm a lesbian. So the men, in order to be desirable to the world, worked their guts out. And they were never home. And they never come home at a decent hour. And they just inflict the same insecurities on their children. Because their kids were not raised with love or attention either. They were raised with neglect by a father who tried to make himself a hero to the world instead of a hero to his own children. And the lie for women, come on, you all know what it is. If I go to any of my New York friends who work on Wall Street, and they all say, Shmuley, I'm tired of dating, I'm tired of womanizing, I want an intimate relationship, I want to settle down. And by the way, I love that expression about marriage, settling down. Like when you were single, you were alive, and now you're in the grave called marriage. You've settled down. So I'll say to him, I have a great girl for you. I'm glad you want to get married. She's intelligent, she's spiritual, she's communally involved, and yet his question every single time is, what does she look like? Thank you very much. We have a very astute male here in the audience. And then when I say to him, well, her hunchback will give you great piggyback rides. We'll just wait for them, hold on. Okay, didn't come. Her hunchback will give you great piggyback rides. And yes, I had dinner with her last week and her glass eye fell into the soup. But look, she put it back effortlessly. He's not interested. Isn't that why we have nothing today? Because we all feel so inadequate. Men feel like they're never successful enough. They're never rich enough. They're never important enough. And women feel like they're never blonde-eyed enough, never blue-eyed, never blonde-haired enough, never blue-eyed enough. Help me here. Never long-legged enough. Their chests are never big enough. They're never young enough. and they're never thin enough. And you thought you were going to be happy when you heard not enough, not enough, not enough? When everything tells us we are inadequate, and then we inflict it on our children. Your grades aren't good enough. The school you're going to isn't good enough. My friends, Pax Americana, yes, America has figured out the great secret of making money, and everyone wants to go to this promised land. But why the misery? Why the unhappiness? We Americans spend our money on garbage just to be happy. Because the real secret of life, and this is the place to which we are headed. The secret of life is that joy, happiness, purpose, even success comes from a feeling that you make a difference in the lives of others. If we continue as a world to focus on our needs and our consumption, as Claire said, we've left no species in the oceans. In America, our kids eat, and they're still hungry. They're becoming obese. The idea of no matter how much you eat, you still need more. Democracy was a dream. It was not a dream of buying a plasma television screen. Democracy was a dream that each and every one of us would be free to develop our human potential, not to work to live, but to live to work. Not to live to work, but to work to live. You get the point. My friends, long ago, in ancient Israel, there were bearded, frail, old men named Zechariah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, and they foretold of a time when the wolf would lie down with the lamb. And this was seen as a metaphor for world peace. But it also means the wolf inside us, the part of us that always has to devour and consume, would finally be at rest, because we wouldn't be so empty on the inside that we need to shove so many things into us, into that bottomless pit, to finally feel like we matter. Michael Sherner believes that religion is a cancer in society. What is evolution? Evolution is everything I just talked about. It's the belief in the survival of the fittest. That people who are not as strong as you, or as pretty as you, or as successful as you, they don't matter as much as you. And along came the message of religion that long ago, each and every one of us was created in the image of God. And because of that, we have infinite value. And that doesn't mean that religion doesn't need to change. It does. It needs to become spiritual and innovative and exciting. But it does mean that the modern day God of the almighty dollar will sink us all. Where are we headed? What is our future? Number one, let us redefine success for men. Let there be 5 points of definition of success for men. Number one, success as a husband. If your wife is on an antidepressant because you never focus on her, and you're always looking at women younger than her, then you are a failure in that department. Number two, success as a father. Do your children feel like they come first in your life? Number three, success as a communal member. Do you give more than you take? Number four, success in your relationship with God. Do you have a spiritual center? Do you live for things that can't always be touched, felt, smelled, or heard? And finally, success in business. Yes, we should be successful in business. We couldn't put on this incredible display. We can't feed the hungry, we can't clothe the naked unless we're successful in business. But it cannot be more than 20% of how we define success. And there must be a new definition of success for women as well. I dream of a world in which when women go out on a date, they believe that the men are as interested in them going to a library and reading a book and formulating an opinion, reading a newspaper to know what's going on in the world, as those men are in those women going to a treadmill or a gym or getting plastic surgery. We need the women's voice in the world because the world lacks peace, it lacks harmony. Women are conciliators. They're softer, they're gentler, they're more nurturing. And if we make them into nothing but pretty mannequins, then they will not be able to heal our male hearts. And we men will continue to be broken, and will continue to live for the Rolexes and the Mercedes. And our world will continue to suffer. Because every problem we talked about today, how we can't stand old people, which ATN spoke of so beautifully, unhappiness and depression, the consuming all the earth's resources, they all come down to that inner emptiness, that we don't feel good about ourselves. Let me conclude. My friends, 3 years ago, I took all of my children. We have 9 children, thank God. Correct, we don't have a television in our bedroom. That is correct. We took our 9 children and we put them into an RV and we drove from New York all the way to Memphis, Tennessee. I wanted to see the patio where on April the 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King, a great modern-day American prophet, who brought the Bible to life and made it into a manifesto of human liberty. I wanted to see where he was cut down by a white assassin's bullet. He had inspired me my whole life. I had to see where the dream ended. And I went with my kids and I looked up at that patio and I saw the place where he had fallen. And it was a very moving experience to see where a great man had given his life for a dream. And then right in front of me, when I least expected it, there was a stone slab that was put there 1 week after he was killed by his best friend Ralph Abernathy. And it's a quote from the Bible in the book of Genesis. It's the story of Joseph, who's hated by his brothers. They're jealous of him. And they say, let us... So the exact quote is there. I'm looking at the stone slab, and this is what it says. Please listen carefully. Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Come, let us slay him, and let us see what shall become of his dream. We in America this past Tuesday saw what became of his dream. We saw that a man with black skin can become the most powerful man on earth with a strange name like Barack Obama. You don't have to fit in to be successful, and you don't have to wear the right watches, and you don't have to have the right company and the right friends. You need to have a dream of human prosperity, because in the final analysis, we are all God's children, and therefore we are all of infinite value.